9.
Imagine landing like the job that finally secures your family's future.
Oh, the dream scenario.
Right. It is the exact role you spent years training for.
Oh.
And the salary is enough to finally let you breathe, to pull you out of that constant cycle of financial panic.
It's life-changing money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But on your very first day, your new boss pulls you into an office, shuts the door, and just lays out a condition.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. To keep this job, to keep the paycheck and the security, you're going to have to do something completely unethical.
Yeah.
Something that violates your deepest, most fundamental moral convictions.
Wow.
And it is not presented as a suggestion. It's the entry fee for the life you want. So, do you walk away knowing it means watching your family struggle? Or do you find a way to justify it? Maybe you just close your eyes, cross your fingers, compartmentalize the guilt, and take the money.
Man, I mean, that is the ultimate collision, right, between economic survival and moral integrity. When we frame it like that, it feels like a very modern, cutthroat corporate dilemma.
It really does.
But we are actually looking at one of the oldest, most intense human conflicts on record.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're uncovering a 2,000-year-old survival guide hidden inside the Book of Revelation. We're looking specifically at a letter written to a group of desperate, blue-collar workers in an ancient city called Thyatira.
Yeah, we're unpacking Revelation chapter 2, verses 18 through 29.
And to really grasp the sheer weight of what's happening in this text, we have to kind of strip away the stained glass windows and that dusty theological atmosphere,
Absolutely.
Because beneath the dramatic apocalyptic language is a gritty, terrified community of people. They're just trying to figure out how to buy groceries, how to keep a roof over their heads, and how to survive in an economy that is fundamentally hostile to their existence.
And, putting ourselves in their shoes is really the only way this text makes sense.
Okay, let's unpack this. Set the scene for us.
Sure. So in the 1st century, Thyatira was located on a major Roman postal road. It's about 40 miles southeast of the prominent city of Pergamum.
Okay, so a decent location.
Very decent. But if you lived there, you likely weren't a politician or some wealthy philosopher. You were a neighborer.
A blue-collar town.
Completely. Thyatira was a bustling, thriving commercial hub, and its entire identity, like its lifeblood, was industry. It was famous for textiles, particularly a very lucrative purple dye trade.
So you're the listener, right? Imagine you're a weaver in this loud, busy commercial town. You wake up every day to the clatter of looms and the smell of dye vats, and you just want to make an honest living.
Just a normal, everyday person.
Right. And the Roman government isn't kicking down your door to arrest you for your faith. The threat here is actually much more insidious. It's entirely economic.
Yeah, it comes from the labor unions.
Wait, really? Labor unions?
Well, the trade guilds. In Thyatira, these guilds held an absolute monopoly on daily life. If you wanted to hold a job or, secure materials to make your leather goods or get a stall to sell dyed fabrics in the market,
you had to be in a guild.
You had to be a member of the local guild. There was no independent contracting.
Yeah.
There was no gig economy outside the system.
So it's all or nothing.
All or nothing. You were in the guild or you were unemployed, ostracized, and completely cut off from the local economy.
Man, on the surface, that just sounds like modern professional networking or like paying your union dues. You jump through the administrative hoops so you can go to work.
Right, but the entry fee in Thyatira was infinitely steeper than a monthly fee because commerce and religion were totally inseparable in the ancient world.
Oh, okay.
Every single trade guild had its own patron god. Apollo, the Greek sun god, was highly venerated in the city, but each specific trade had its own local deities, too.
So a guild meeting isn't just a bunch of guys sitting around a wooden table discussing the price of wool.
Not at all. These were massive social events held in pagan temples. They involved mandatory ritual sacrifices to the patron gods to, secure good fortune for the trade.
And you couldn't just opt out of that part.
No, it was mandatory. And it gets worse. The meat from that sacrifice was then served at a massive banquet. And these feasts routinely escalated into heavy drinking and rampant sexual immorality. Yeah, it was expected behavior. It was the cultural glue that held the business community together.
That paints an incredibly bleak picture. I mean, you are being told that to keep your loom running, to keep selling your textiles so your kids don't starve, you have to actively participate in pagan sacrifices and drunken orgies.
It is literally conform or starve.
But human nature is highly predictable when we get backed into a corner like that. We don't usually choose martyrdom if we think there's a third option.
We look for a workaround.
Exactly. I'm putting myself in the sandals of that first-century weaver, and I'm thinking, can't I just show up, eat the meat, pretend to worship the patron god, quietly pay my dues, and just go home?
Yeah, the classic, surely God understands I'm just playing the game to survive.
Right. He knows my heart is in the right place.
Well, that mindset, that desperate search for a theological loophole, that is the exact engine driving the conflict in Thyatira. They were doing exactly what you just described.
They were trying to play both sides.
They were actively compromising, trying to keep a foot in both worlds. And because they were trying to game the system, the way Christ addresses this specific church shifts dramatically from the others.
How so?
Well, when we look at the letters to other churches in Revelation, like Ephesus or Pergamum, the believers are generally praised for standing strong against evil, even if they had other flaws. Thyatira marks a progressive worsening of the situation.
Yeah, the tone shift is impossible to miss.
Yeah.
I mean, in the very first chapter of Revelation, Christ is introduced as the Son of Man.
Which is a very specific title.
Right. It carries a heavy emphasis on humility and sympathetic identification with humanity. It invokes the image of someone who has walked in our shoes, a high priest who understands the pain, the hunger, and the exhaustion of the human condition.
It's a title that says, I understand your struggle.
Exactly. But the moment the letter to Thyatira begins, that title vanishes.
It's gone. He introduces himself as the Son of God.
Which is intense.
It's a stark, direct declaration of absolute deity. He is of the exact same kind and being as God the Father. The sympathy of the fellow human sufferer is totally replaced by the sheer, unapproachable authority of a divine judge.
And the visual imagery used to describe him here is, well, it's designed to be terrifying.
Very much so.
The text says, he arrives with eyes like a flame of fire and feet like burnished bronze.
Yeah.
When I read that, the eyes of fire instantly makes sense in the context of this loophole mindset we were talking about.
It's a piercing vision.
Right. It represents this laser-like vision, a gaze that burns through every facade, every rationalization, every excuse. You cannot tell a judge with eyes of fire that you were just networking at the pagan temple.
No, he sees straight through to the core motives.
But the feet of burnished bronze always trip me up. I just picture like a heavy metal statue. Is there a reason the text specifically focuses on glowing feet?
Yeah, actually, it comes back to how justice was administered in the ancient world. Kings and judges sat on elevated, raised thrones. So when a subject or a criminal was brought before the king, they were physically positioned on the floor, looking up. The closest part of the king to the person being judged was his feet.
Oh, that makes sense.
The feet resting on the footstool came to symbolize the king's absolute, inescapable authority to crush rebellion. But here, the bronze isn't just heavy, it is burnished. It is glowing, red-hot metal pulled straight from the furnace.
Here's where it gets really interesting. So it's not just a symbol of heavy authority. It represents active, burning discipline.
Exactly.
It makes me think of a modern workplace scenario where your manager just drops the friendly mentor routine. They stop asking about your weekend, and they walk into your office with the HR director and a glowing red clipboard.
That's a terrifying visual.
You realize instantly that playtime is over, the leniency is gone, and you're about to face the consequences of your actions.
It is a terrifying realization. The red-hot glowing feet illustrate severe chastening. I mean, other biblical passages like Hebrews chapter 12 and Revelation 19 use similar imagery to describe the severity of divine discipline.
A judge with eyes of fire and feet of glowing bronze is not someone you can trick with a technicality.
No, absolutely not.
But why did the church in Thyatira need this level of intervention? Why the sudden blazing crackdown? It wasn't just a few weak individuals caving to the pressure of the guild.
Yeah,
right?
it was institutional. They were being systematically led into this compromise by a specific antagonist within their ranks.
The plot thickens.
It really does. The text introduces a woman operating within the church who is posing as a prophetess, and she is given the symbolic name Jezebel.
Ooh.
Yeah, to any first-century Christian with a background in the Hebrew scriptures, that name is a massive, flashing red warning light.
Because back in the Old Testament book of 2 Kings, the original Queen Jezebel was notorious. She orchestrated the murder of prophets, instituted state-sponsored pagan worship, and was so fundamentally vile that she was ultimately thrown from a window and eaten by dogs.
Right. Calling someone Jezebel is not a casual critique.
It's the ultimate spiritual insult.
It really is. And beyond the name, her very position was a violation of the community's established boundaries. First-century biblical teaching, specifically outlined in letters like 1 Timothy, stated that women were not to hold the authoritative teaching roles in the church.
Okay.
But the real danger wasn't merely her usurpation of authority. It was the specific theology she was selling to these desperate blue-collar workers.
This is the part I find fascinating.
Yeah.
Because how do you actually convince a devout Christian to walk into a pagan temple and participate in a sexual feast? What kind of theological gymnastics does that require?
A lot of it.
Because it's not like she stood up and said, hey, everyone, let's abandon our faith and go worship Apollo. Nobody would have listened to that.
No, it had to be far more insidious. And it was incredibly sophisticated. What she was teaching was an early form of a philosophy that historians call Gnosticism, combined with a libertine ethic.
Libertine meaning like total moral freedom.
Exactly. Total moral freedom, particularly regarding sexuality. And the Gnostic element is what provided the justification.
Also?
Well, the core of this philosophy was a radical separation between the physical and the spiritual. Her twisted logic went something like this. The spirit belongs to God. The spirit is pure, elevated, and untouchable.
Right.
The physical body, however, is just base matter. It is entirely irrelevant to your spiritual standing.
Wow. I see the trap. If the physical body is completely disconnected from the spiritual soul, then what you do with the body simply doesn't matter.
Precisely the argument. She taught the believers that they could plunge into what the text calls the deep things of Satan.
Which sounds awful.
It does. But she's saying they could attend the guild meetings. They could eat the meat sacrificed to the idols. They could fully engage in the rampant sexual immorality of the banquets. And through all of that physical behavior, they could remain completely, totally spiritually pure.
That is wild.
She provided a theological framework that allowed them to keep their jobs, participate in the corrupt culture, and still believe they were faithfully worshiping God in their spirits.
So she's basically selling them a spiritual firewall.
A spiritual firewall, yes, that's exactly it.
She's essentially telling them, go ahead and download all the malware you want on the body's hard drive. Your soul is safely stored in the cloud, completely insulated, and the two systems do not interact.
That is such a good analogy, and you can see why it was so incredibly seductive to the people of Thyatira.
It's the ultimate product for her target market. If I am terrified about losing my leather shop and someone who claims to speak for God stands up and says, hey, God wants you to provide for your family. He doesn't mind if you go to the guild feast because your spirit is secure.
You take that deal.
I am taking that deal. It completely eliminates the cognitive dissonance. It turns a cowardly compromise into a sophisticated, enlightened spiritual strategy.
It replaces conviction with convenience. But this is exactly why the divine judge arrives with eyes of fire. That firewall is a total lethal fabrication.
You just can't compartmentalize your life that way.
No, you cannot separate what you do with your physical body from the state of your soul. Jezebel was leading them to their spiritual execution while assuring them it was a brilliant survival tactic.
Which makes the ensuing consequences make total sense. A lie that dangerous, a lie that threatens to completely rot a community from the inside out by making them comfortable with evil. It requires an equally severe response to eradicate it.
It does.
And the text does not pull any punches regarding what happens next.
The response is devastating, but it is really important to note that it wasn't immediate. Christ actually gave Jezebel a window of grace, a period of time to repent.
But she refused.
She refused, and because of that stubborn refusal, the judgments laid out are absolute. First, for Jezebel herself, the text says she will be thrown onto a bed of sickness.
Now, I noticed looking at the original language that the words of sickness aren't actually in the original Greek text.
Good catch, yeah.
Translators added them later to try and clarify the sentence. But if you take those words away, the implication is much darker. He is simply throwing her onto a bed, the implication being a bed of eternal torment.
Exactly.
Christ is promising to cast Jezebel and all false teachers who operate with her level of deliberate deception directly into hell.
It is a final, permanent judgment. But the consequences ripple outward. For her followers, the people the text describes as committing adultery with her teachings, the punishment is great tribulation.
Just to be clear, we should probably mention that this doesn't mean the apocalyptic great tribulation at the end of the world that Revelation talks about later on.
Right, no, this is highly specific to them. The word used here signifies great distress, intense trouble, or severe chastening. Because these followers are sinning Christians who fell for a sophisticated lie, they aren't threatened with eternal damnation, but with an agonizing, intense discipline in this life.
That's a wake-up call.
A very harsh one. It is a severe physical and circumstantial correction designed to force them to repent.
And there is a third tier to this judgment. The text states that her children will be killed with pestilence. Now, these aren't her biological kids, right?
Good, no.
These are her spiritual children, her disciples, the next generation of leaders who would adopt this toxic Gnostic theology and spread it further. To stop the ideological contagion, they will be wiped out by disease.
It is a severe quarantine measure.
Yeah.
And it brings up a vital theological principle established in 1 Peter that judgment begins with the house of God.
Wait.
The standard of conduct is actually significantly higher for those inside the community of faith than for those outside of it.
Because they have the truth. They should know better. But honestly, looking at the sheer scale of this response, pestilence, great tribulation, the fires of hell, is this imagery meant to just terrify them? Or is it a reflection of how spiritually lethal Jezebel's compromise actually was?
It's a reflection of the lethality.
It feels like the divine equivalent of a surgeon amputating a limb to save the patient. It is brutal, violent, and terrifying. But it's the only way to stop the infection from killing the entire body.
The amputation analogy captures the necessity of the violence perfectly. God takes the purity of his people seriously, and he severely judges those who manufacture theology that allows believers to participate in evil while feeling righteous.
Jezebel wasn't just making a mistake in her doctrine.
No, she was weaponizing grace to sanction sin. That is a cancer that requires aggressive surgery.
It is an incredibly heavy reality.
Yeah.
We've spent this entire time looking at the darkness of the guilds, the seductive lie of the spiritual firewall, and the burning bronze feet of judgment. But the text actually pivots at the very end.
It does. There's hope.
Right. There's a remnant in Thyatira. What happens to the few blue-collar workers who refuse the easy way out? The weavers who didn't take the loophole, who accepted the financial ruin, who lost their businesses and became outcasts to hold fast to their convictions.
For those faithful few, the entire tone of the letter softens dramatically. Christ addresses the rest who are in Thyatira who do not hold this teaching, and the very first thing he offers them is an incredible comfort. He says, I place no other burden on you.
Man, think about the psychological relief of hearing that.
Huge relief.
They are exhausted. They're carrying the immense weight of surviving without the economic safety net of the guilds. They're likely impoverished and completely socially isolated. And he is essentially saying, I see the weight you are carrying, and I am not adding a single thing to your load.
Their only directive is to hold fast to what they have until the end, to simply endure. And for that patient endurance, they are promised two magnificent rewards that directly address their current suffering.
What's the first one?
The first reward is absolute authority. Christ promises them authority over the nations, stating they will rule with a rod of iron that can shatter clay vessels.
The reversal of fortune there is staggering. In their current earthly reality, these believers are at the absolute bottom of the food chain. They are marginalized, powerless laborers being systematically squeezed out of their own local economy by corrupt union bosses.
They have zero leverage.
Exactly. But the promise is that, in the coming Messianic kingdom, they will be the ones governing. And not just governing, ruling with an unbreakable iron rod that can shatter the fragile, clay-like structures of earthly power.
It completely flips the power dynamic. The powerless will reign. But the second reward offered to them is even more profound, and it is highly personal. Christ promises to give them the morning star.
I'm looking at this promise of the morning star, and it really stands out because everything else so far has been about avoiding dark, hidden things.
Right, Jezebel's teachings.
Jezebel was offering the deep things of Satan, hidden knowledge, secret compromises in the shadows of the pagan temples. What exactly is the morning star in this context?
Well, the morning star is the brightest celestial body in the sky right before the dawn. But it is not a physical object. He is handing them. Drawing on other scriptures, specifically later in Revelation and in the letters of Peter, the morning star is actually a title Christ uses for himself.
Wait, really? So he isn't giving them a reward separate from himself. He is the reward.
Exactly. Giving them the morning star means that Christ promises to reveal himself to them in his complete, resplendent glory as God. It is the ultimate promise of unbroken intimacy, absolute clarity, and divine presence.
Look at the incredible poetic contrast this leaves us with today.
It's beautiful.
Jezebel came to the terrified workers in Thyatira and offered them a survival strategy built on darkness. She offered a compromise hidden in the shadows, a way to sneak around, pretend to be one thing in public and another in private, and call it enlightenment.
Yeah.
Christ counters by offering the morning star the brightest, most undeniable light. Absolute transparency.
It is the choice between surviving in the shadows with a lie or standing in the light with the truth, no matter the economic cost. The letter to Thyatira isn't just an artifact of ancient history. It exposes the timeless danger of rationalizing our convictions for the sake of convenience.
Because the most dangerous threats to our integrity rarely look like a villain holding a sword to our neck.
No, almost never.
They look like a convenient compromise. They look like a sophisticated loophole that promises to make your life easier, to keep your career trajectory moving upward, to help you fit in seamlessly with the culture of your specific guild.
And then there will always be a Jezebel figure, right? A cultural voice, a colleague, or even our own internal monologue offering a prepackaged rationalization. A voice assuring us that we can split our lives in two, that we can compromise our actions as long as our heart is in the right place. But the judge with eyes of fire sees right through the firewall.
Think about your own life. Think about the modern guilds you belong to, the social circles, the corporate cultures, the professional networks you rely on for your status and your livelihood. What is the entry fee they are subtly asking you to pay? And more importantly, what ethical corners are you being asked to cut? Or what beliefs are you being asked to quietly shelve just to stay in the room?
That's the real question.
When you are offered that convenient loophole, that deal that lets you compromise your integrity while pretending everything is fine, will you recognize it as a trap? Or will you take the deal? Keep questioning the easy answers, keep learning from the past, and whatever you do, hold fast to the light. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
9.